Welcome to another episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. My name is Matt Welch, being joined by Devin Hasson, and only Devin Hasson today, a two-man show. David Woolman, I guess, en route back to the Dallas area from Colorado. Took a little weekend getaway, so hope he's safe travels to David. But nevertheless, Devin, it's just you and I today. And wouldn't you know it, man, for one more week at least, got a lot of soccer to talk about. Because it is the herd it's thinned a little bit from the 10 teams that we had headed to the regional semifinals last week, but not by much. We got 6 teams,
and even the teams that we say goodbye to barely went out. Those were all close matches all last week.
No kidding. So we have 6 teams within our coverage area who are playing in the state semifinals on Tuesday night, the penultimate round of the postseason, and that has to be. I mean, again, I don't have any frame of reference, but I mean, just going off just the sheer volume, that's got to be the most that our coverage area has ever had in any sport at one time. So yeah, we have 2 teams in 6A, 2 in 5A, 2 in 4A. So just going to work backwards and just touch a few minutes on everybody that's still standing as we're inching closer and closer to that finish line. But yes, we have 6 teams that are bound for the state semifinals later on this week. Let's start over in 6A, I guess, with the Allen boys and the Flower Mound girls, who are still alive and kicking. The Allen boys in the state semifinals for the first time ever, their deepest playoff run in program history. And over the past week, they in the regional semifinals, they took down Keller. I was at that game. Could talk a little bit about that one. In a game that was a little bit different from basically every match Allen had played over the past few weeks. For the first time, really, since their last loss, which came March 1st against McKinney-Boyd, a 1-0 shutout loss. For the first time since then, Allen finally ran into a defense that, pushed back a bit and didn't just get eviscerated by this pressure cooker offense that Allen has had rolling out for quite some time. They had scored at least 3 goals in each of their first 3 rounds of the playoffs, and then against Keller, this is a 1-1 match through 100 minutes of soccer. So bit of uncharted waters for Allen as far as, the first time that they have not been able to generate offense like they had been accustomed to. It was Sam Presser who was able to net an equalizer in the first half after I believe it was a PK goal that Keller was able to get on the board first with. But this goes to a shootout, the first time that Allen has been in a shootout all season, and there was not a whole lot of drama to this because Allen went a perfect 5 for 5 on their PKs. And not only did they go a perfect 5 for 5, they all aimed in the exact same spot. They shot left on all 5 shots, and went perfect 5 for 5. There was not a whole lot of drama to this one. They end up winning in PKs 5-3, and that then sets up a regional final against El Paso Eastlake. And I'm not going to act like I'm any sort of authority on El Paso Eastlake soccer, but at least from reading around, there was at least the idea out there that of the 8 teams that were still left in Class 6A on the boys' side, you could argue that Eastlake was maybe the best of them remaining and was at least, in some outlets, the odds-on favorite to outright win the state championship. Allen puts the kibosh on that. They beat him 3-2. They were able to score 2 goals inside the final 16 minutes of the match. I guess the winds picked up out there, and they were able to kind of use that to their advantage. It was Aiden Mendoza who scored the go-ahead goal with 7 minutes left, and Allen just held serve from there. Sam Presser did his thing. He scored earlier in the match. I believe he's had at least 1 goal in every playoff match that Allen's had so far. Eastlake came in hot. They'd won 8 in a row. They had outscored opponents, 33-7 over that stretch, averaging, more than 4 goals per match. And, Allen was able to, after, again, a bit of a down performance for its offense against Keller, they get right back on track, and they've now scored at least 3 goals in 4 of their 5 playoff matches, including against a stout Eastlake bunch. And now they're bound for the state semifinals against a team that I'm not sure at the start of the postseason what the odds were that Rockwell Heath would be the dance partner coming out of Region 2. Rockwell Heath they closed the regular season winless in 7 straight matches. Now, you covered District 10-6A, so I don't recall, I don't know if it was, injuries, or at this time of year you have to wonder if it's quarantines or whatever, but, this Heath team has just shifted gears at the absolute perfect time. Their defense has been outstanding in the playoffs, only 1 goal allowed, but nevertheless, this is just the 3 seed from District 10-6A. So, was Rockwall Heath at all on the radar as you're covering this district throughout the season? Or
not as a state semifinalist, no, not as a regional champion, because this is a team that basically finished, third. They finished tied with North Mesquite for second, but both well behind Tyler Legacy, who kind of ran away with that district. But yeah, that was going to the final week of the season. There was a possibility that Rockwall Heath would not make the playoffs because Mesquite and Horn finishes 3 points back, which is essentially 1 victory back of Rockwall Heath at the end. So yeah, no, that's Tyler Legacy was so impressive during that district run. They didn't have a regulation loss. They picked up points in all 12 matches. I'm just looking at it right now. Rockwall Heath was 5-4-3. In district. So yeah, but they, I got to see them play once, and they're a talented group. Okay. But when you have that many close matches, you got to think once you get to the playoffs that luck's going to run out someplace. Not, I shouldn't say luck, but the ability to win close games is only going to get you so far. But they've obviously learned during the district season, learned during the regular season, and caught fire at the right time.
Because you just don't see that again. It was a 7-match winless streak to close out the regular season, and then they've somehow, everything has fallen into place where they emerge as the regional champion out of Region 2. And like I said, their defense has been incredible during this run. So you pair that opposite an Allen team that has been, one of the hotter offenses in the state, and it should make for a fun one. I believe it's going to be out at Mesquite Memorial Stadium. That is at 6 p.m. Tuesday. Allen and Rockwall Heath for a shot at a state championship later on in the week out in Georgetown. So that is at least in our coverage area, the boys representative from Class 6A. On the girls' side, we have a state semifinal between, you could argue, the 2 best teams remaining in the postseason in Class 6A, and that is Flower Mound against the Woodlands. This one Tuesday, 6 o'clock out at Belton. Man, Flower Mound is on an absolute tear right now. That was coming off that momentous win over Prosper, being the first team to defeat Prosper all season, knocking them out in the 3rd round of the playoffs with a 3-1 overtime victory. How would Flower Mound build off of that? And quite emphatically, because they had themselves a pretty impressive week. They just went on an absolute tear in the second half against Eaton, ended up winning that match in the regional semis 5-0, and that set up maybe the most highly anticipated iteration of the Mound Showdown in the history of the rivalry. A regional final between Flower Mound and Marcus, and you look at the matches that these 2 teams had in the regular season, and it was a coin flip heading into that match, you could say. The first matchup, the district opener, was a 1-1 draw back in January, and then their second matchup, Marcus actually led 2-0 before Flower Mound rallied with 3 unanswered goals to win 3-2. So at that point, you just, who knew what to expect out of the third matchup, just given the familiarity between these 2 programs, and it ends up being a runaway for Flower Mound. They win 3-0, and a lot of that was a tribute to their success on set pieces. They had 2 goals off corner kicks. Sydney Becerra is obviously very, very instrumental in that aspect of Flower Mound's offense. She takes those kicks, and she was able to put a couple on frame for 2 of her teammates that were finished. The first one came in the first half from Marianne Baltmanis, who's a defender, one of their star defenders. So not a player that's traditionally in on a whole lot of offense. So cool for her to find the back of the net. And then in the second half, and this was the 3rd goal of the match for Flower Mound, Becerra found Sky Leach for a goal right around the 60th minute. And then in between, Becerra scored a goal of her own just before halftime. So lots of Sydney Becerra in this matchup. And, there was a moment there in the second half when Marcus got a PK that was saved by Peyton Whipple, Flower Mound's star goalkeeper. And that's now, 2 clean sheets in a row after, giving up 1 goal in each of their first 3 playoff matches. Flower Mound's they're in a really, really good groove right now. This is a 12-match winning streak that they've amassed. You look at that matchup earlier in district against Marcus, where they did have that big comeback in the second half, as kind of being the turning point in this, because it wasn't long before that they had lost to Hebron, which snapped a multi-year winning streak that they had put together. And since then, they've looked like the team that was, just tearing through everyone last season, and now they are rewarded with a spot in the Final Four. And it's going to be a good one, because the Woodlands, they come in with just one loss to their record. They're riding a 19-match winning streak. They've only allowed 9 goals all season. They're ranked number 1 in 6A by TGCA. They did have a couple close ones last week, though, with a couple Manfield schools. Had to tough out a couple wins there to get to this point. But nevertheless, though, yeah, you can argue these are the 2 best teams remaining. And, with the role that Flower Mound's on, it's going to take a team that's damn good to knock them off, because they've been, just tearing through teams from Prosper to Marcus. These are some loud results that they're putting together. So, Flower Mound girls headed to the state semifinals. So that is a look at the 2 teams that we have still standing over in Class 6A. Let's talk about, a couple schools that, just a couple soccer programs in general that are in a pretty good way right now, and that is our 2 teams in 5A, both coming from the same high school, and that is the What a surprise, man. Frisco Wakeland, they now with the boys, this is old hat. With the girls, do you recall when the last time the girls were on a run like this was?
They won the state championship in 2018. So
okay, well,
it's funny because some people kind of forget it, because the boys have been so dominant in making 4 straight runs to the state championship game that the girls are somewhat a little bit overshadowed. But they kind of like, hey, by the way, we've had
we're awesome too.
We've been 3 rounds deep 10 straight years also. So don't forget about us.
Yeah, that's wow. There might not be another high school in the state that's got a recent run of success like that within its 2 soccer programs. That is outstanding.
And they save it for the right time.
Yeah.
They don't always just go. They're not necessarily always ranked number 1 from start to finish. Mm-hmm. They play a tough non-district schedule. They play in obviously a very tough district with their Frisco ISD mates, and that gets them ready. And that's been proven out over the last decade when you see their postseason success.
So, we can now transition to 5A and talk whether it's the Wakeland boys or the Wakeland girls, wherever you want to start with this, Devin. But, obviously some pretty happy times over there in Frisco as these 2 are bound for the state tournament. And, now what do you make of the road that they've been able to take to this point? And, what are they looking like heading into a pivotal week?
Well, we'll start with the girls because
what a win that was for them in the regional finals.
Yeah, anytime you can take down a perennial power like Highland Park, and not, again, Wakeland's a perennial power themselves. But I think that was kind of when the brackets came out. I think you kind of circled, even though Wakeland came in as the 2nd seed because they tied for the district championship with Memorial. But Highland Park, is undefeated. They cruise through their district, and they're just. I don't know off the top of my head, but 10, 12 state championships, I believe, over the years. And Wakeland was able to get it done. It was a game that was delayed. It had a lightning delay. Everybody was fighting the elements on Friday. But McKenna Jenkins came through, scored both goals. And they go to overtime, but they get the game winner and don't have to go to penalties, which is sometimes just a crapshoot because
I saw one on Friday that I'll get to in a bit.
Yeah. But just really impressive. And I talk about McKenna Jenkins. Allie Perry's been their leading scorer all year. In the previous round against Forney, they rolled over Forney in a 6-0 win, and they spread it around. McKenna Jenkins had a hat trick. Bella James scored. Brooke Hartshorn. They got a lot of different players who can score. But it's their defense. That goal they gave up against Highland Park was the first one they allowed in the playoffs.
Wow.
Drew Stover, their outstanding keeper, had 12 shutouts in the regular season. They allowed only 8 goals prior to the playoffs during the regular season, and then obviously they now allowed 1 in 5 rounds of the playoffs. So, they're just a complete team. And it's interesting to see, it's a team that knows success, not necessarily these girls, because we've talked about it in the last couple of weeks with the playoffs basically being canceled last year. There's some of these seniors even. It's been 2 years since they've been in the playoffs, so it's kind of hard to just say, oh well, they have playoff experience, or especially the underclassmen.
Yeah.
But when your program has experienced the amount of success that they have, it's just kind of something you come up as underclassmen. It's just this sense of confidence that, hey, look at the trophies on the wall, look at the banners on the wall, look at the trophies in the case. We're used to being in this position, and we'll see. They obviously got a tough challenge with a very good Grapevine team, but with the number of playmakers they have on offense, and like I say, especially that defense, I fully expect Wakeland to be playing in Georgetown on Friday.
What about the boys?
I probably should expect the boys to be the same since they've been in the last four state championship games. Again, this is a Wakeland team that's during the regular season they outscored their opponents 63-13. Mm-hmm. During the playoffs, 15-3. So that tells you they got just like the girls a great combination of scoring and defense. Now they've gotten tested. Mm-hmm. R.L. Turner pushed them to a shootout. Actually scored twice on them. That's 2 of 3 goals that they've given up in the playoffs, and played against a very good Longview team last. It was moved to Saturday morning as everybody tried to play the elements. Mm-hmm. In a game they were able to win 1-0. Ryan Greener gets the game-winning goal. But they've just got Brennan Bezdek. He had 20 goals in the regular season. He scored twice in their 2-0 win against Nacogdoches. I mentioned Ryan Greener. William Heidman has been a consistent scorer for him. Garrett Purcell, Marlon Williams, Jack. They have so many different guys that can do it, and then obviously the defense is stout. And again, this is their 7th straight year being to at least the regional semifinals. They're looking for their 5th straight trip to the state finals. They won in 2017. They won in 2018. So this is obviously a team that expects to be there. And like the girls, I fully expect them to be there on Friday as well.
So as you have, Wakeland with all the success that their boys and girls teams are having, that is not the only high school in our coverage area that still has both its boys and girls soccer teams still playing. As we dip down to Class 4A to round out the podcast, and we can talk about the budding soccer powerhouse that is Celina, Texas, man. The Celina boys and girls both in their deepest playoff runs in program history, and they're both in the state semifinals. They played, what a cool occasion, though, just given those circumstances, then to be playing at the same venue in a doubleheader on Friday in their respective regional finals out in Forney. So you had to go through a weather delay. How long did your delay last?
About 45 minutes.
This was a 2-hour delay out in Forney, and fortunately the girls' match had already been put to rest essentially, and they wound up just calling the match after the fact. This was a doubleheader from the time the girls kicked off at 6 p.m. to the dramatic finish of the boys' match later on in the night. This was a doubleheader that took over 6 hours to complete. The boys' match did not go final until 12:15 a.m., and it was a wild one. So there was a 2-hour lightning delay. And the weather itself wasn't that bad. There was rainfall really for about, 15, 20 minutes, but there just kept on being these little just bursts of lightning out in the distance. It didn't look like anything that was too threatening, but they wouldn't stop. So every time you had to reset the 30-minute timer for the delay. And, this boys match that was supposed to begin at 8 winds up beginning around, 10 o'clock. And then, of course, it goes the entire 100 without a single goal, leads to the shootout. But, I guess to set the stage at the very beginning of this. So for the Celina girls, they got this thing rolling. They played Henderson in the regional finals. And so they got there in the semis by knocking off Bullard 7-0. So right on par with their other torrid scoring efforts. They had entered the regional final having outscored their first 4 playoff opponents 50-0. So imagine the surprise, though, a little over 2 minutes when they get beat on a counter off following a Celina corner kick, and Henderson scores. little over 2 minutes into the match, and just like that, it is 1-0 Henderson. So really, for the first time since their last loss in the regular season against Melissa, a little bit of adversity for Celina, and that's kind of been the part that head coach Steve Nichols has been really anxious to see how his team handles, just because the nature of their schedule and that district just didn't afford them too many opportunities to truly be tested. And they responded well. They were able to net the equalizer about 10-15 minutes later, courtesy of who else? Taylor Drzeski, who set the state's single-season goal-scoring record in their regional semifinal against Bullard. She added a second goal in the second half to up her total on the year to 114 goals. She got other goals in the second half from, Ashlyn Vanna, Lexi Toot, and after this was a 1-1 draw at the half, and then Nichols said that they made some tweaks with personnel and a couple changes to the system, and the ball started just moving a bit better from piece to piece, and the floodgates kind of opened there for a bit. They wound up scoring 3 unanswered goals in the second half, and it would have been 4 because right as Taylor got tripped up in the box with about 3:45 left in the second half, and they're already up 4-1. Match has already pretty much been put to pasture. But right as she's lining up for a PK, that's when the siren goes off for the weather delay, and they just decided after the fact just to call the match. I mean, we had seen enough, and Celina girls able to advance to the state semifinals. Big week for Taylor Drzeski. As I mentioned, she sets that record earlier on. She actually is a multi-sport athlete. She qualifies for the regional track meet in 3 different events that same week as well, in the 100, the long jump, and the triple jump. And then Coach Nichols said afterwards that actually right before the regional final, she was off in another UIL competition and actually wasn't even able to ride the bus. She had to drive separate from them just because of the timing of the event to get there, to get all the way out to Forney. So it's been a busy week for Taylor Drzeski, but she's handled it all in stride, all the attention that has come with setting this record, and she's now helped lead Celina to its in just its 6th year as a varsity program, and they are right there in the state semifinals. And then that prefaced a matchup with the boys team. The boys, who are in just their 2nd ever postseason, just their 3rd year as a varsity program, they were able to knock off Paris in the regional semis 3-2, and played against Palestine in a very contentious regional final. This was one where Celina actually came out the start of both halves and actually almost surprised Palestine with a really aggressive shot on goal within the opening seconds of each half, and then things kind of settled into more of it was more of a defensive game for Celina. They had a really, really tough time sustaining possession against Palestine, and some of that had to do with, especially in the second half, the wins in this match were just insane. I mean, standing down there on the sidelines, snapping pictures during this one, as I was they were so strong as I'm trying to walk with the winds coming at my back, as I'm trying to walk up and down the sidelines, it felt like I was on one of those moving walkways at the airport. I mean, you're gliding up there. I've never been in winds that strong, and you could see just the level to which it affected the flow of play on both sides. I mean, Celina had a really, you were kicking balls that are almost going backwards over your head. The winds were so strong. They actually had to pause the match midway through the second half because the Celina goal was actually being blown back by the winds. It was so strong, it was pushing the goalpost back. They actually had to momentarily delay things so they could bring out. You saw guys carrying weight plates out so they could place them against the back of the goalpost just to keep it in place. The winds were that strong, and somehow through it all, despite having to play pretty much in those conditions for the entire 40 minutes of the second half, Celina was able to keep this thing scoreless. They were under some pretty heavy fire. Now, granted, it was pretty tough for Palestine to get shots on frame, just because with those winds, you have to kind of recalibrate the way that you there's just the amount of force that you put behind a shot, the way you angle it, and because those shots were coming in there like lasers. They were so fast because you had that wind carrying the ball, but they were able to get out of this out of regulation, 0-0, and then that same score held through the first, through the 2 overtimes. So then you get a shootout, and then Celina ends up winning this thing 3-2 on PKs. They get 3, and then it was their goalkeeper Nathan Yost who was huge in keeping that thing scoreless during regulation, but he's able to save Palestine's 5th PK attempt, and then the celebrations ensue. So a long, grueling doubleheader ends with Celina making its first ever trip to the state semifinals. They play Fort Worth. Diamond Hill Jarvis up next, another team that is making its deepest playoff run in their history. That is the second leg of a doubleheader on Tuesday out at South Lake Carroll. I believe the start time for that is at 7:30, and that will actually follow up the girls' game with Celina as they take on Midlothian Heritage, and that's one of the kind of the benchmark programs that when Coach Nichols has talked about, needing to find ways to make sure their offense translates against elite teams. That's typically the first team that he mentions as far as what kind of the standard is right now in the girls level at 4A in the Metroplex. Midlothian Heritage, they're arguably the odds-on favorite to win this thing right now. They've only had one loss all season, and it was to Nolan Catholic out in Fort Worth, so they're undefeated against public schools. They've only allowed one goal in the playoffs, but hey, so is Celina. And at this point, I think we're seeing that the rankings might not mean a ton at this juncture, given some of the upsets that we've seen, at least over in 6A. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be a busy Tuesday night as we got 6 teams from our coverage area playing in the state soccer semifinals, and all the teams that any teams that advance, they will head on down to Georgetown later in the week for the state championship games. I believe all the girls state finals are going to take place on Friday. The boys finals take place on Saturday. So we'll see what kind of turnout there is, if any, from our coverage area. Whether 6-0, 0-6, who knows? It's again at this juncture of the playoffs, with as good as all these teams are, you really have a tough time saying that anything is for sure, given the caliber of these programs. But yes, that is a look at kind of where things are at in our coverage area as we head into a busy week in the state semifinals. And that'll do it for this episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. We'll be back. We'll see if we'll be back next week. I know we got all area soccer voting, and that can be pretty busy time. So we might be back next week. We might not. We'll see. Until then, folks, you take care, and we will talk to y'all later.